Yeah, hello, my name is Antti Kuvaja. I'm leading the product management team for network security. I'm going to go today through a couple of features related to human point security, but we have in the next-gen firewall. Unfortunately, it doesn't have time to go comprehensively through the product and so all the features. But instead of that, I'm going to drill down in a couple of very recent introductions what we have done in the product related to the topic. The first one is Endpoint Context Agent, what we recently introduced. Richard mentioned in the beginning that security is not anymore binary decision. We need a contextual information so that we can do better decision if we should allow something or deny something, or start tracking something more. In order to make that intelligent, we have to collect more information and contextual information. And one answer for that is Endpoint Context Agent, what we introduced lately. This is an agent component we deploy on the endpoint. And only duty of it is to give heads-ups and contextual information as a meta information to the firewall. So that firewall has more information that where the connection was origin. What was the device? What type of the device? What is the operating system? What is the security posture of the device and the operating system? Who is the user behind the...
What do you mean by security posture?
For example, are you running antivirus locally on the device? Is the operating system of the device patched? Are you running local firewall on the device? For example. Who is the user behind of the application who is generating the network traffic? And what is actually the client application of the traffic? There is already current methods available in the next-gen firewalls on the market and also available with our firewall to figure out who is the user and figure out who is the application related to the network traffic. But there are some caveats on that. For example, the user information, there's a couple of ways to identify the user. Either ask that in the authentication in the firewall, that's not always the best user experience for end user to ask the authentication pop-ups. The other method is to deploy an agent type of component in the user database, like Active Directory, and monitor the log events there to see that who are the users logged in different IP addresses to the domain, and this way map the IP addresses and usernames together. That mechanism is not bulletproof. So it's, for example, users who logged in the domain and disconnect the cables without having a clean logout from the systems leaves kind of shadow entities in the database, that seems to be somebody still logged on the IP address even though it doesn't exist anymore. And now somebody else who gets the IP address from the DHCP may start getting tracked or even getting allowed to networks based on that shadow information. And that's one problem we are solving with the Endpoint Context Agent. Now, instead of just asking it from the AD directory that where this user has been last time logged in, on which IP address, we can really see that the user information on the host device. And also differentiate users if there is multi-user computers and several users using a same device simultaneously, and even separate a domain user from local users. A little bit same story for the applications as well. The next-gen firewalls has been able to identify applications from the network traffic by looking at the protocol, maybe the destination where the traffic is going to, if it's a cloud service, and then also some using a fingerprint mechanism to identify from the payload and the beginning of the payload what is carried in the connection, that what is the application. But still it's more or less guessing that what is actually the application. Maybe in the high-level popular applications, yeah, we can identify that what are those network applications. but the firewall doesn't have a clue that what is the client application generating the traffic. For example, if it's a web browsing, the traditional method doesn't show information that if it's a malware, command and control connection going to the internet using HTTP, or is it a browser making the connection. And with Endpoint Agent, now we can do that distinction and differentiate that traffic and application what is generating the traffic. So the idea is that the endpoint is now deployed on the Endpoint Agent is deployed on the host, and when there is an application is about to open a TCP socket and connection, the agent grabs it and holds the connection for a couple of milliseconds and sends a heads-up message to the firewall that there is connection coming on these and these ports, and so sends an meta information to the firewall. Some of the information is just currently utilized just for visibility, but for some information we can also utilize for enforcement already. So this increases the contextual information we can then use for adaptive security. Let me show a couple of examples what we can do in the product itself with the context agent information. Let me try to zoom in on this one. Okay, for some reason it doesn't allow me to do that. But I've created a couple of rules here in the firewall security policy. Let's look at the first one. So I have now a rule that where the source is group of users, this Helsinki is name of the user group, and then I have defined a additional parameter that this user group, if they fails in the security posture check, and there we can look at what is the security posture check. I'm checking that if the antivirus is enabled, or sorry, it's enabled but it's not up to date, or is disabled, or we can figure out that what is the status of it, or if the updates has not been the device has not been patched for 3 months, or the local firewall of the endpoint is not running. It means that this check is failing. And then if the user is trying to reach external networks using whatever protocols, I'm discarding the traffic and showing a message to the user. Let me show as a response. Instead of just blocking, we are able to show a notifications for the users and give them additional information that why they have been now guaranteed and get blocked. So we can this way inform that what was the reason and guide the user to contact the help desk, for example, to remediate the issue. And this way we can now prevent that unsecure users are accessing to internet and getting maybe infected there. The next example, what we can do with the endpoint agent is related, for example, very standardized environment like a point of sales network in the retail, that you have cashier machines, maybe they're very fixed applications communicating from PCI network to backend services. And we know exactly what are these applications communicating through the firewall and what are the hosts involved on this. So now addition to just specifying the IP addresses and the host there and protocols, I can specify the exact library, the binary executable generating the traffic and put that in the firewall. So if this binary change, for example, due to malware infection, it wouldn't be anymore able to communicate out through the firewall. But if the binary is exact same, and we can verify that from the checksum of the binary, we can allow the traffic now to access from the point of sales network to the SQL server, what is in the backend, using a suitable protocols.
So I want to make sure I understand that. The enforcement is happening at the endpoint in this case, so at the agent itself. So the agent says, hey, I'm bad.exe, I'm going to do some bad stuff on the network. The control plane is the back end.
I'm glad you asked. Yeah, that's important. The enforcement is not done in the endpoint itself. It just sends notifications. The enforcement is done in the firewall.
Okay, so
there's the policy and the enforcement is in the firewall side.
Okay, so this is just a more metadata for the firewall to act upon.
Yeah.
And only.
Okay.
So this helps to keep the endpoint very simple. It's just a simple piece of software. And the idea is to consolidate that with the unified endpoint VR, where we unify other endpoints from Forcepoint products.
Is there a limit to the SaaSes you support?
Sorry, can you
Is
repeat?
there a limit to the number of SaaS providers you support in types of SaaS? So for example, a lot of CASBs are limited to like the major players.
This endpoint agent works only with the Forcepoint firewall.
No, it's not about Forcepoint. It's not about your firewall, it's about your SaaS endpoints. So if I'm going to Salesforce, I would assume you have no problems with that. But if I'm going to a file share API down in Brazil, can you stop that if you don't even know it exists?
Yeah, so this is one mechanism how we can do enforcement in the firewall. All the traditional ways are there as well. We can do IP-based access list, URLs, and application-based access list as well. There is nothing kind of application-specific itself on this one. So it's about user configuration and what they define in the policy, how they utilize the meta information the endpoint agent is delivering to the firewall.
See, most CASBs that I know of actually can delve into the depths of the protocol of where you're going. So for example, if I'm going to go into Salesforce, I could set up rules that say, you can go to that part of Salesforce, but not that part.
This isn't the CASB, is it?
Yeah, this is not CAS.
Yeah, we have a different product then specifically for cloud.
Yeah, this is just firewall. This is just traditional good
yeah.
old-fashioned.
Good. Yeah, got it. Sorry, I was thinking ahead.
Okay. Yeah, that is coming next.
Shut up, Ed.
He's anxious. We know who's going to have questions about CASB.
And if that agent isn't there on my device, like I'm using an iPad, it doesn't hurt.
Yeah, then we can utilize the existing methods for enforcement in the firewall, but it already gives, even though you have a kind of hybrid deployment, some devices are having the ECA and some devices doesn't, you can, in the administrator side, it already gives an indication for them that which devices are maybe more trusted than the other ones, and they can maybe deal a little bit differently with them and allow maybe extended access to the devices they trust more.
Okay, so, but can you pick up any metadata from an iPad or an iPhone or?
Currently, it's only available for Windows, but we are planning to expand the operating system support. All right, then the third example is to use the same functionality a little bit differently. Instead of now specifying a singular application is able to access somewhere, instead of that, there is also a mechanism that we can make an inventory, run a inventory on the host device. For example, what has been deployed using a corporate golden image, and you can run inventory of all the applications and import that in the firewall, and then whitelist all the applications you are using in the corporate deployed laptops for example, and allow them to access in the network freely. So that if somebody now deploys something else than it's coming in the corporate images on the devices, we can prevent the access. So this gives deeper, more granular capabilities to control the application access now using the client application information. And then also provides now additional visibility, contextual information, but can be later used also for better analytics and adaptive control. Then the other example, user dashboards. We introduced lately, in very recent version, a dedicated dashboard to monitor user activity, network activity. So it's a dashboard with bind information from different sources. So it's network events, now endpoint events from that context agent, and then also it's able to pull information from Active Directory in the singular view. Addition of just monitoring things, we also develop a alerting mechanism so that we can enrich the data and consolidate the information so that we can provide indications of increasing risk or decreasing trust related to the users. I will go a little bit more detailed through that alerting concept. So this is now the kind of first introduction of human point security in the network security side, that we provide more human, user-oriented visibility for network activities, and we bind information on the very dedicated user dashboard. Let me show this also from the UI. So this is the management system. Yeah, the traditional way is to look at things on the very threat-centric manners and see that what are the top malwares or exploits in the system. But we now started to summarize things around the users, that who are the users has been accessing through the firewall in the past period. That period can be configured in the system, that is it one day or week or some other time period. And if there somebody was rising up the privacy concern, that if there is some privacy policy that admins are not allowed to monitor this level of information, this can be easily hide also from the system. Or change the usernames into IP addresses if you just want to handle the network traffic individually, but then you lose some of the benefit of this. So idea is now to monitor the user activity and kind of float up the users which seems to indicate having a most risk associated on their network behavior. There is some statistics around the users, and then if we click some of the user, we can see more detail of that individual person, information from Active Directory, endpoint information coming from that endpoint agent, if that is deployed, and then related user behavior events. Unfortunately, this simulation environment I have locally on my laptop. I don't have kind of realistic endpoint user behavior event logs, but I can show what these alert and test are, what are configurable in the system. So the idea in the user behavior monitoring is to try to map the activities to some predefined kind of user persona stereotypes, or try to find a use cases what are identified to be risky for the corporation. For example, data exfiltration or compromised user computer or account or just negative workplace behavior. And now in the firewall and with this user alerting system, we can, for example, identify situations and rise up a different level of alerts, which can then are getting then summarized in this monitoring view. And this example I have now that there is an alert defined that the user, if user is trying to access for forbidden web categories, what has been defined to be blocked, but if the user tries to do that persistently within some time period, several times, we can rise an extra alert of this, and this way monitor that there is something odd going on with this user. Either he's persistently trying to do something what is against of the corporate security policy, or maybe it's just matter of the education of educating that people more, that he maybe shouldn't click all the phishing emails links what he got in the email, or maybe there's something else going on. So this is not about yet enforcement. It's more the monitoring part and collecting information, and now kind of collecting indication of increasing risk associated of these users. Let me take another example. Then there can be excessive data transfer from some certain servers, for example. If the user is downloading a lot of stuff, and that's kind of unusual on that user group from those destinations, we can also
So you're going
trigger.
to flag the people watching Tech Field Day videos?
So, sorry, can you repeat the question?
I said, so you're going to flag the people watching Tech Field Day videos?
The technology allows that, but yeah, it's part of monitoring. That's another question.
It lowers their threat score.
No, I should raise the threat score.
That's what I was thinking.
If you watch us, you learn bad things. You learn a lot of good things, too.
Then the other kind of scenario is, and what we try to, or many times customers want to identify, is the compromised user account or malicious user. Sometimes it can be both, that it's a malware actually operating on user's computer causing that traffic. For example, now if we identify that IPS noticed that there is a successful attack that somebody went through, we are able to see the responses if the exploit are successfully penetrating on the devices or not. We can flag those already that this host is compromised. Or we see some odd traffic, for example, port scanning now from internal network on the user computers. We can flag that this is now abnormal behavior and malicious user activities. Or we identify that there is even more serious event, like an attack coming from internal host, trying to attack on different hosts in the internal network. We can again flag that as a event. But yeah, these are fully configurable. So there is some examples we provide with the system, and then the users are able to define more of these.